There it is. That's awesome. All the time. That'll get us going. That'll get us ready. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. I'm one of your hosts of Working It Out Across Generations, Justin Hurdle Price.
And I am Dr. Lynne. Thank you for being here.
Awesome.
We are so excited. Number one, all of you who tune in, or if you're new to tuning in, we talk all things conflict on this show. And conflict happens in so many different ways. And we try to bring you the everyday to the larger conflicts, but we want to make it relatable to you. And today we know that we have a topic that's relatable to all of us. And then we got a little bit of a special thing because we have a mother daughter duo to talk with this mother son duo. So that's really cool. That's why we're super excited. We're going to be talking about grief, loss, conflict, and resilience today. And it's a topic that is not just something that we know really everybody can relate to because we've all had losses in our lives, right? But it's something that touches us very deeply, and we discovered that it touches our special guests deeply as well. So we want to bring them on. Welcome, please. Laurie Schloff and Hava Horowitz, or Hava Horowitz and Laurie Schloff. Thank you for being with us. We are so happy that you said yes to the invitation to be here and to be able to just share yourselves with not just us, but all of the people who tune in all over the world for Working It Out Across Generations. I want to give you a proper introduction, and then we know you're going to say what you need to say from there. So, Hava Horowitz is a professional communication coach and facilitator. She works with entrepreneurs, aspiring leaders, and individuals to embrace the most authentic version of themselves. In her work, she leverages evidence based communication practices, acting techniques, and mindful self study. With the blazer on, she can be found working for leaders and teams behind the scenes at Harvard Business School, Techstars, KPMG, Citibank, MIT, and more. She is also the co-founder and former CEO of Terraseed, the planet's most sustainable supplement brand. Blazer off, Hava is a musician and offers sound healing work in her community. So let me just see, is that my mic? Maybe that's making that noise, but let me just make sure. I don't think so. Executive communication coach Laurie Schloff collaborates with professionals to achieve outstanding career success and business results through communication. A nationally renowned master coach and author of 3 books, Laurie is an internationally renowned expert in the field of corporate communication coaching, and corporations and individuals seek her expertise in so many things: presentation skills, conference and keynoting, leadership communication. The list goes on and on. Yeah.
And that's because I'm so old. And I'm also Hava's mom, but you kind of implied that in the introduction.
Yes, that's right. I love that. Yes, absolutely. So,
Awesome. So that's a very formal introduction, right? You gotta have those. It's always good to have those. What about yourselves would you want to share with the group that is not in your intro? Just something about your work and how you show up in your work, right? Tell us something about yourself that specifically, is not within the introduction.
So for me, work is so central to me. It'd be very interesting to hear from the kids what it's like to have a mom who loves their work. And I guess it's because I have great clients and they're all motivated to become better communicators. So I help people to be better communicators, and some of them get results really quick. Like in the last week, I helped someone who had to give a commencement speech at a university in Hawaii, and was kind of doing it last minute. And I also helped someone who was receiving a huge award for her work in social justice. And so that was extremely gratifying.
Yeah.
Two examples. But really, I'm very, very thrilled and proud that my daughter also has become so interested in communication and continues to help others with some different twists than I have.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Thank you, Laurie. What about you, Hava?
Yeah, I suppose, my working with my mom and her taking me under her wing and really training me with the foundation of skills required to be a successful communication coach. These evidence-based best practices were so critical for me to gain the confidence to do this work. But I think ultimately a lot of the work I do just centers around true presence and listening.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and we all show up very, very differently depending on who is across the table from us.
Yes.
And we all evoke different sides from each other depending on who is across the table from us. When I'm gossiping with my best friend, a very different side of me comes out than when I'm having a deep conversation with my mom versus when I'm greeted with a beautiful, creative strangers like yourself versus when I'm, honked at by a passerby or in a truck. A different side of me is elicited by whoever is in front of me. And I think that's so much of the coaching work is can I really be available to who is in front of me?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's it's so interesting because so many of us think that the person sitting across from us is just like us in many ways. We talk to them in the same way that we wish to be spoken to at times, right? Especially if we don't know them, we think they think like us, right? And we think that we are communicating very well to them because, of course, they understand what we're saying because we talk the way they talk, or we listen the way they listen, and it is so different from that in reality. And so I love the work that you all do because it really does help people not just be themselves, but to really be themselves in a way that is useful in a conversation that kind of invites everybody in, right? And it's our responsibility to help folks to really understand that and see that. And it's interesting because in our first conversation together and trying to find out, well, what would be great to talk about on the show, we found quite a few commonalities. We really did, right?
Yep.
The fact that mother and daughter, you work together, and the fact that I started Justin working in conflict resolution when he was 10. And so he's definitely had the opportunity to learn, but also that we work together now as well, and that's a really great thing. And then you all doing the communication skills and all that's involved with that, and we doing conflict resolution, which also involves communication skills. There's a lot there, but the thing that really got us talking was when we discovered that we had the common bond of having a great loss in the last few years. And I'll share with the audience that my husband, Justin's dad, passed very unexpectedly in March 2020, and the grief journey that began at that moment for both of us was really very heavy. And so in discovering and sharing that with you all, we discovered that you had your own loss. And we'd like if you would tell us about that, whatever you're willing to share.
Hava, why don't you share?
Sure. Yeah. So also a similar, I think we both also bonded over the unexpected nature of the loss too, which, my father, my mom's husband, passed away in a fire in our house in 2021. So very similar time span too. And yeah. A lot comes with that. I was not in the country at the time, actually.
Yeah.
And not to go too deep into like grief theory or things like that, but one of the most potent feelings at the time for me was, oh my God, is my mom okay? And
Mm-hmm.
I was obsessed with, is she gonna die now? You know, like it, like this whole portal of possibility opened for me of like, what if everyone in my life is gonna die one day? And it, like I just felt this such acute fear that my mom was gonna die. And I remember calling all of her friends, please check on her, please make sure that she's okay right now. And I learned this is a thing that happens. Like when you experience grief, especially for me, it was really the first major loss in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess it's called grief proximity. You just start
Right.
to think, oh my God, what if everybody around me happens to it?
Absolutely.
I'd be okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And likewise, at the funeral,
Yeah.
I was only focused on Hava, only.
Mm-hmm.
I really wasn't focused on my own feelings hardly at all. I mean, she was more overtly grief stricken. I was probably more in shock.
Mm.
But honestly, I think I was sort of numb, but all I cared about was that she was going to make it through.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And I so identify with that. I actually didn't even think. I've lost both of my parents, and my mom
Mm.
went first. And but it's been over 30 years now. So I didn't even think that my sons, that Justin being the youngest, especially, and being here with me, would think, oh my gosh, is my mom going to go? I really never even considered that. So, Hava, with you saying that, I can remember him even bringing that up to me. And I'm
Wow.
just really surprised by that.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
should have been, but I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I
Right.
know for me, I definitely resonate because, all it takes is that one, as you said, for just a portal of things to come through. The good, the bad, the ugly, everything that makes those things what they are. And that is something that I struggled with and honestly still struggle with, to this day. All it takes is, my mom going out and not responding to a text for 3 hours. And I'm like, you're older than me. If you're going to enforce this rule on me, like, right. But you're like, come on, right. It's only fair. But, when you really go to the deeper lengths of why that is coming up and the anxiety around that and some of the feelings around that, and some that you don't have language for, it
Yeah.
really does become one of those things where you're not necessarily trying to give up control, but because you had to, but you want to gain control in whatever area in which you can. Loss is such a thing that's just out of our hands. It really was for me such a movie and TV dramatic kind of thing until I went through it for myself, and I'm like, oh wow, this is like a real thing. Like this isn't scripted. This isn't, this was out of nowhere. This just happened. And I know early on for sure when I didn't have the language for a lot of these feelings, that definitely brought up some conflict. So I really appreciate where we're headed because that leads to my next question as we're talking about some of our first experiences with grief, right? That was definitely mine, and I'm so grateful for Laurie and Mom sharing theirs. What are some of the conflicts that you noticed when dealing with your first time around grief? Like conflicts maybe within yourself, maybe within the dynamic of your relationships, in the family, out of the family, just some of the conflicts that were coming up for you. What was that like to deal with?
Yeah, I can respond to that. I think when somebody passes, you really sort of take the life story of them, your story and their story, and understand. I mean, I was just really sorting through all of the ways that my father impacted me for better and for challenging ways too. Um, I remember after he passed, my first reaction after being desperately afraid of my mom was like, I need to document everything. that is coming through right now. Because it was like I had this telephone line to the other side and things were becoming clear. You know, stories about my family were becoming clear. My own relationships, the why I acted the way I did in response to my father was becoming clear. And I needed to just furiously write everything. I was also hearing stories from coworkers and from my mom and his extended family. I was learning so much about his universe that I just needed to write it all down. And it was hard because the narrative that I thought was true was not the narrative that my mom necessarily considered true. And I really felt at that moment that I needed the validation of this truth. Oh my God, I got it. I finally get my family. And she's like, well, no, actually, that's not the whole story. And I, at that time, couldn't really handle my truth not being the truth because it's what I needed for my own sort of sanity and stability. So, there was, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because I know we're going to talk about resilience, I think a conflict, and this leads into resilience. First of all, you don't know how you're going to react. I once met a woman who was grieving deeply 10 years after her spouse died. And I think there's a name for that, prolonged grief. I had so much to do when something sudden administratively, and my husband was both a collector and also a bit of a pack rat. So I had to deal with hundreds of thousands of objects and what to do with them and all that. And so I'd say a conflict, and again leads into resilience, is moving forward, but also honoring grief. And for example, today I passed a restaurant called Miami Subs that we went in twice a week. My husband loved like the fast food hot dogs. I've been avoiding it for 3 years. And I'm sort of waiting for my daughter to come visit me to go there and sort of, I don't know what it would be, but something cathartic. So that's been and I've been, though I've had like days of craziness, I have been pretty resilient. And I had I'm pretty proud of myself, to tell you the truth. But you know, one eye was always focused on my daughter. And I'm feeling like emotionally she has grown a lot, is in a very good place, and with a lot of her special relationships.
That's awesome. Laurie, I so appreciate that, because there's something that I said on this show a little bit ago. I'm not too sure exactly which episode, but I'm probably going to end up saying it again and again and again as I'm doing this with my mom and experiencing this life for the first time with my mom. But it's simply that, you know, it's our parents' first time living in this world too. I know that for me, one of the things that came up that I struggled with was, you know, well, I had parents and they're older than me, so they have to know everything and things have to be whatever it is, just, you know, in concrete, this is what it is, good, bad, the ugly, right? And they have to have the answers for everything, and they have to, you know, deal with whatever comes up in me, right? And so I think even just hearing you say, you know, I'm proud of myself. Like, I'm proud of how I've overcome this. I'm proud of this one area that I struggled in that is now, you know, not necessarily a weakness, but veering more into, you know, a strength or something that I'm more aware of, right? Have more language for. I don't think that a lot of parents get that grace. And I don't think a lot of parents give themselves that grace. So I think to even have you just say that is such a model for so many parents out there who are constantly second guessing themselves and constantly, you know, having to think about how are my actions going to affect my kids and all of these things, right? When really we're all doing the best we can. And especially with parents, with all you're holding, you know, we see more than ever now that we've lost one, unfortunately, that there's so much more effort that goes into not only your individual stories, but just taking up that role in the first place. So I really appreciated that. And I think a lot of people at home are going to appreciate that too. So thank you.
Laurie, I resonate so much. There was so much to do. I was not at all expecting it. I mean, at all. And then on top of it, for us, COVID was right at our backs, and literally everything had to be done in a week. everything, and I was the one to do it, basically, and it was really difficult. But I know one story about conflict and resilience. One of the things that I had to decide on the spot was he was on life support. Was I going to have my sons come? Was it important to be there then or to be there when he was more presentable, right? And that was the hardest decision. And in the beginning, it caused conflict. That it was such a very difficult thing to be there with him on life support, that caused more trauma in the grief process. And I will say the resilience of both of us was that Justin, not that long ago, said you made the right choice, because in the beginning he said I shouldn't have been there. We should not have been there. And the reason I wanted them to be there is because I literally was not there when my mom died, and we were in the hospital. They did not let us go and be with her during her last few minutes, really, and I didn't want that to happen to them. And so the conflicts, really started some stuff, but again, around the resilience. And I'm wondering if there was anything, Hava, we can start with you first, that surprised you about yourself during this time.
Yeah. Hmm. Um, I was very, I think just based off of the previous conversations that we've had as the four of us, I think, Justin, I hear you having a different relationship with your father. My father and I loved each other in a lot of ways, but also really struggled to understand each other. Like it felt like we were kind of aliens to each other. Like who wanted to explore each other's world and wanted to take the rocket ship, but just like couldn't figure out the path how. And a lot of pain there, a lot of a lack of communication around, like, I want to get there, but don't know how. We didn't know how to say that to each other.
Right.
And when you pass to the other side, there's a whole new set of languages that open up.
Yeah.
And we didn't need to communicate verbally. And, this is very mystical, but in a way, I feel that our relationship is deeper in a sense than it ever was on planet Earth. I felt like being there at his final breaths when he crossed to the other side. I saw him at his deepest soul essence, and how very healing that was to me.
Yeah.
He deeply tried his best, and so did I. And the limitations that we have in this particular life form and the generational traumas that inform this life form, like the ascension process and seeing at that soul level his true beauty. Yeah, that was what I surprised me. I didn't expect that at all.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Laurie, what about you? Any surprises for you during this time?
Well, I guess I'd go back to the resilience part, in that in many ways I had viewed myself emotionally as weaker. I'm a strong professional woman, but I had viewed myself emotionally as weaker than I think I turned out to be. And so that was a surprise. Maybe I didn't want to learn.
Yeah.
And it's not over by any means. And I also maybe I'll give credit a little bit to ambulance. I'll give credit to the power also of the brain as protection. In other words, there was a numbing that I think does help people get through the hard part.
That's true.
I mean, I have a memory, and it sounds absolutely ridiculous, of looking at the different options for coffins and calling up my husband's sister and showing her pictures as if I was in TJ Maxx.
Yeah.
And I think back, there was this like my brain, whatever, did what it needed to do.
Yes, yes. Yeah, because they do kind of make it like a shopping experience. I don't mean to be
Yeah,
more.
I mean, really,
There's a
I
catalog and
understand what's
everything. Yeah, yeah,
Yes, yeah.
that's
But
interesting.
that's absolutely true. Yeah, the brain does spare us, right? Especially right in the beginning.
Yeah.
There is you're really kind of going through the motions and have to do things in a certain amount of time, and so you go in that place, right? And Hava, to your point, I will tell you that 2 weeks after my husband died, Justin was having such a hard time, and I spoke to his dad, and I just said, you got to do something. You got to help me with this. And I literally heard
Wow.
him say, Lynn, I just got here, and you're already asking for stuff.
that's funny. Uh,
That was definitely something he would say. Yeah.
I was
So,
always finding it fascinating. Oh, go ahead. Sorry,
no, go
continue.
No,
ahead,
I
please,
please,
didn't mean to cut
please.
you off.
please.
Oh, there was something I learned after my father died in the Jewish tradition.
Hmm.
The body dies,
Right.
and then it takes some time for that soul to travel,
Mhm.
and to return home to whatever the other side is. And that
Right.
period is called inunit. And in that period of time, you don't say, "I'm so sorry for your loss." You don't say, you know,
Wow.
you don't even really share much that your loved one has died. Um, it's a period where you're not mourning yet because it honors this crazy
Oh,
time where you
yes.
just gotta get the stuff done. You gotta do the logistics.
Hmm.
Um, and the funeral is where the grieving process starts in the Jewish tradition.
Okay.
Of course, there's Shiva, where you
Right.
basically don't move and people come to your house and serve you
Right.
food, and you lay down on the floor and basically are still with that grieving process.
Right.
And then it's interesting because Shiva ends. It ends after 7 days.
Hmm.
And in the Jewish tradition, it speaks to we kind of have to get up off the floor and we do have to move on with life.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
I, yeah, I
Yeah.
found that as a useful framework just to spark thinking about
Hmm.
how I was going through the process. We definitely weren't like strictly following all the traditions, but
Yep.
it was like there was something to it.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. And I apologize to all of my Jewish friends who I said sorry for your loss too early, that having not known, right? Having
Yeah.
not known, but I love
Yeah.
that you learn from different folks. It's always been a love of mine is how we're different and
Mm-hmm.
what that means and what it adds to the world, right? I'm did you have the next question or you know mine? Okay. You have communication skills. Like we do conflict resolution. We do that. And I'm wondering how did the having communication skills as a foundation serve you or not serve you during this time? Because I know for me sometimes it was just off the seat of my pants. With all the skills that I have, I might have lashed out or
Yeah.
just yeah.
yeah, interesting. Well, I'll tell you one way that doesn't have to do that much with interpersonal, but every event our family ever had involves performing.
Hmm.
So, in other words, you can't just say one sentence.
Okay.
So you have to, it has to be a performance. It has to be impressive to the audience. So that again was wonderful because I wrote something beautiful and Jack and Hava sang a beautiful song at her father's grave.
Hmm.
And everyone else who spoke at the funeral performed.
Right.
So that's, it's very, it's therapeutic.
Hmm.
It's therapeutic to use your creative powers in grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also serves that purpose of resilience and bless you, whoever sneezed,
Yeah.
and distraction. I actually forgot your question, but
I was saying, how did the communication skills
yes. So that
yeah. Hmm.
so part of being a communication coach, because basically what we do is we help people to have presence. We have different methods. So I can't say something ordinary at a funeral.
Right.
It has to be
Right.
Would it be right?
And
Would it be right?
And I'm often asked to, be the reverend for a day or
Right.
speak. So I don't know, Hava, you want to comment about being
Yeah, I
communicated?
love this question. I love what you're saying, Mom.
Yeah,
I
we
never really
use.
thought about this, but what we teach is how to adapt our communication to meet our audience, right?
Right.
At the funeral, to me, the audience was my dad,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and my dad was a stand-up comedian. You know,
Yeah.
he was a dentist by trade, but he used that dentist office as a stage. And the best part about that stage, people were stuck with Novocaine. They couldn't respond. You know, they were high on laughing gas. They had to just endure the jokes. And so, you know, walking out of the funeral, the rabbi said that was the craziest funeral I've ever been
It's
to.
insane.
And I thought to myself, that is what my dad would have wanted.
Yes.
Is the rabbi's craziest funeral that she's ever been to. Success.
Yeah.
I think, you know, between Mom and I, we probably didn't always employ our communication skills or our conflict resolution skills. I think.
Yeah, no, and remember we met once with someone, like a coach. We
That's
didn't
right.
really have someone asked me last night if the grief brought us more together, and I didn't quite know how to answer it because I didn't know what would have happened if we didn't have the grief.
Interesting.
And I guess that's a question I'd ask you too,
Yeah.
being the interviewer.
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
What would you say?
I don't know what would have happened. I don't know how I would be. I don't know
Yeah.
how I would respond to certain things that I know now I've worked at trying to respond to differently and actually do respond to differently. And I think for me as a young person, having both of my parents, there is a huge privilege in that. There is a lot of security in that, and on top of my parents being present, right? So I think for me, I was already kind of living in such a la la land fairy tale. Well, I got my parents, and like, you know, whatever happens, like I got them, so that when one of them got stripped and it was their time, right? It really snapped me out of that fairy tale thinking, right? And it made me more accountable and made me more all of these things and made me want to take on more responsibility and more ownership of me and how I show up. And so I don't know how much of that would have been amplified had I not had that loss. However, you know, never glad to lose something and something so valuable. But I mean, I think one of the things that shocked me so much was how much I gained from such a loss.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I would say that yes, it did bring us closer, and we were pretty close. But I think what it made us do is to say the hard stuff to each other because it was so painful, right? I mean, even there, when my husband died, right after the funeral, I got very, very sick, so sick that I was afraid to tell either of my sons. And now knowing, you know, and then finding out later that that was the biggest fear was that he would then lose me. I'm so glad that I made that decision. But I was sick for 46 days. I literally went very slowly from not being able to eat much to not even being able to hold down water without severe pain in the chest. I know it was gas, but it was just, I'd never had it before like that. And it almost felt like I was afraid of having a heart attack. And then, you know, then with the COVID and I was having gastrointestinal. So I was just like, oh my gosh, I was afraid I was going to die as well. So holding that back though, and eventually having the conversation with him started us talking about other things as well. And I think that that is really what brought us close, because he and his dad were very close, and we were just in this place where things were starting to go well, right? Things were starting to fall in place in his life, in our lives. And so for me, in my head, in my plan, that we're making it. And then this just, I can remember all I kept doing. My cousin came up, and all I kept doing is looking at her going, what happened? And we're both shaking our heads like, what happened? Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for the question, Laurie. Back to us.
For sharing.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Hava, when was your first realization that you were resilient during this time?
Oh, I think I need to tune into that a little bit more, Dr. Lynne.
Okay.
I think, yeah, it's not really a word I've felt like I especially connected with. I think what's a little bit different in my story than my mom's is I had a lot of free time at this particular moment in time, and it was such a precious gift that the universe gave me. I was running a startup for 3 years, and it was my baby. I mean, this was like a 14-hour a day job.
Yeah.
2 weeks before I had left the business, I'd sold my shares. I was out of the company 2 weeks before my father passed. And it was like, honestly, a gift that the universe gave me because I needed the space to process my father in a very slow way. You know, I didn't feel like there were obstacles in my way, in a way of doing that process. So when I think of the word resilience, I think of overcoming obstacles to get to a certain place. And I felt like I was blessed with sort of a clear path in a way to do that. Of course, there were lots of challenges, but you know, I was more focused on like, oh my God, I have this abundance of space and ability to do this hard work right now.
Yeah. Thank you, Hava. And everybody's got to find their own word because maybe folks don't resonate with that word either, right? With resilient and what it means. You know, sometimes it's like to keep going, and then sometimes I hate to use that because I feel like the world tries to rush us back and so quickly, and then they want us back to who we were before this loss, and there's no way, in my view, that I could ever be the same. I'm not saying I completely changed, but there's no way I'm that same person that can come back in that same way, especially right away. And it's so it's whatever your word is out there, folks, for you, and how you walked through this experience, came through the, you know, or cried on the floor and crawled your way through the experience. We don't know because I would say it's different for everyone. And I'm just wondering, Laurie, is there anything that you would like to share with our viewers out there, that lesson learned from grief, or anything that you might want to just encourage anybody around who's experiencing this at this time?
Well, I think it can be a way to connect. I don't know if Hava and I would be closer or not closer if the tragedy didn't happen, but I felt like she, and continues to be, there for me. Now, it did coincide with her being in her late 20s and stuff, which is a time when there's probably more recognition that your parents are really cool in their own way.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's something that I appreciate. And maybe, I don't know if there's a lesson there, maybe in when somebody's going through grief, there are people who care and love you, and maybe that is a time possibly you can build an even stronger connection. And actually that sort of did happen. There were, like, you know, somewhat distant friends or distant cousins who connected, and it made me feel good about them, and that relationship was sort of solidified. And I think that happened. And Hava, you reached out to some of Dad's friends, right?
Wow.
Yeah,
Which was very
absolutely
special, and they loved that. They loved that you reached out.
You know, and I don't know how old your dad. My dad was older. You know, he had me when he was what, 45. So when he died, it sort of revealed to me he had this whole life, like a longer life before I existed than
Yeah.
after. And as I said, I was just so hungry to document it all. I wanted to know this man. Like when he passed, it's like I wanted to learn about him, like almost as if I didn't know him. Like I wanted to know him as from the sources that he could no longer tell me the stories. So I needed to collect them.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to share anything about your dad's funeral experience for you,
Yeah.
awaken a funeral.
Um, it was difficult.
But I mean, just hearing the stories. Because Hava's talking about hearing the stories.
Yeah, I mean,
learning.
I think for me, like it was definitely great. And I appreciate, that because, we had some of my dad's friends that we had no idea about. We had colleagues and coworkers at different stages of his career who came and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I think getting that story, those stories was definitely valuable. And at the same time, I very much was just like, well, how come I didn't get to experience this with you while you
Yeah.
were here? Like, I mean, some of this stuff you were doing and you were impacting people while I was here. So I'm just thinking, you're impacting the people who are in the closest proximity to you when clearly that's just not true. If there's a whole other world
Right.
that's in this room, like there were different worlds in
Yeah.
that room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And at one time existing at one time honoring the same thing. And so it was definitely a mixed bag for me, and I think that I've only gotten more comfortable with the feelings being a mixed bag as I've asked more questions
Yeah.
as time has gone on. I've found out even more as time has gone on. I'm finding out stuff as close to last week, right? And so I love how much we're even saying just how much the journey continues. It's not something that, you know, okay, it's been a few years, we're back to normal, and we're going to show up the same or show up the way that people are used to us showing up, and that's going to feel good, right? I feel like as I've gotten more answers, I've kind of released myself from, you know, feeling like I need to show up at all times in this perfect capacity, right? This is
Mm.
a very, very tough thing that has a lot of different emotions, right? I didn't know grief.
Yeah.
I didn't know grief had stages, right? I thought it was just like one thing that was like, oh, like if I'm sad, cool. If I'm angry, cool. If I'm grieving, I'm grieving. When it's like all of those fit under the umbrella of grief, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that's what I've got for me as far as
Mm.
my experience with that. But as we're moving into, I started to touch a little bit on healing, right? The healing part of this, as I said, one of those things for me is definitely, asking questions and tapping more into the new ways that I get to communicate, like you said, Hava, with my father in this new capacity. What are some of your non-negotiables, like your personal non-negotiables, maybe non-negotiables for the relationship that you guys have when it comes to the healing part of this journey? I know for me, I'm very much a therapy
Mm.
advocate, right? But I know that therapy in that space is not for everyone, right? And so, just what are some of your non-negotiables that you've discovered are things like, I need to make sure that I do this to make sure I can keep going while also honoring the fact that, feelings are going to come up in this process.
Yeah, and it's so ever evolving, and we're so blessed to
Yeah.
live in a world where we're exposed to so many tools and
Yeah.
paths for healing. And I'm fortunate that I've dabbled in a lot of them
Yeah.
from yogic and somatic practices to shamanic medicine communities. To traditional talk therapy to getting a drink with a friend. All of these are healing
All these
modalities.
things. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and as you were speaking, Justin, what was kind of being revealed to me was when you were in that in that funeral, and you saw all the many roles that your dad played for so many people, and you're like, I wanted to see him play that character. I wish I got to see him play that character. I only got that character. What the heck? I want to see the whole movie.
Right.
And you know, it made me think about the role that I played with my father, and there are some roles that were that really became central to my identity, and one was around motivation. I always really wanted to impress my father. That was a big part of my identity.
Yeah.
I deeply wanted to impress him. Sort of was one of the most important things in my life, actually, for a long time.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of extrinsic motivation in that. One of the biggest self changes that happened for me after he passed was I was like, holy crap, I don't have to prove to him anymore. And this key source of motivation that I always had, really one of the big drivers of my motivation, no longer existed.
Yeah.
And that was very scary.
Yeah.
Because I had to relocate what was motivation for me.
Right.
Yeah.
That's honestly a journey I'm still on.
Yeah.
Where is that deeper well within?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Motivation.
Yeah. What about, thank you, Hava. Wow, these so deep. What about you, Laurie? We want to get you in before the closing minutes of the program.
Well, I love the conversation because, we see what we see. So it's beautiful to hear everyone talking about their experience. And certainly I'm learning new things about Hava's perspective on things. So it's lovely and hard. I think I've done my fair share of, I don't know, denial, but certainly avoidance.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Anytime anyone says, so, where are you in life, or what happened to your husband, I definitely feel a push-pull. Part of me wants to tell the story, and part of me is totally avoidant. And I guess it's a lot of trust. For me, I don't like to trust people who I don't feel totally comfortable with the story, because it's such a precious and hard story. But I like this kind of conversation that we're having, especially the parent-child piece of it. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
I think it could be a show in and of itself.
I know.
Yeah.
We have to have you all back on to talk about the parent-child piece and the teaming up, the duo. I want to say, for me, for this piece, the healing for me is I constantly talk to him, but also I'm the one, when we all get together, that tells the Warren stories, right?
That's cool.
I truly believe that, and I can see that it's hard, right? Because it's painful still, as it would be and should be, but I believe that we have to keep him alive in that way as well. And I remember the first Thanksgiving after, I said, we're going to do a go around, and we're going to tell, our favorite Warren stories.
I love it.
And I think that's a piece that sometimes people shut out. They don't want to talk about the person at all. They're afraid it'll bring up all kinds of emotions, or it's too hard for them as well. And I know that it can be healing. And so that's the way that I tend to do it. And I do it on a regular basis too. Your dad would love this. Yeah.
I relate to that, Lynn, because I'm very conscious of sharing things with Hava, and sometimes she's like, "Oh, you told me that 25 times." But that speaks to, like, it was recently her birthday, and there's a hysterical story about bringing her home from the hospital. My husband wanted to take a video of me leaving the hospital, and he was accosted by the security guards, because you're not supposed to take a video, and my husband wouldn't stand for it, and he runs out, and the security guards run after him. I mean, that's such an Eddie story. Eddie stories, Warren stories, and that does make things that does make things live.
Yeah.
Yes.
Love
Yeah.
it. Love it.
Yep.
So, final word from both of you, and we're going to share where folks can find you. Anything you want to say?
Hava?
I feel compelled to just say, I feel compelled to say thank you to my mom. And really, like, in this moment, honor really what you went through. I think I was so focused on my own healing process that I don't even know if I fully have honored the resilience you really did have. And I also want to say I forgive you for all the ways that I needed you and I didn't even know what I needed, and maybe we didn't know how to show up for each other. And I'm sure there were many ways I didn't know how to show up for you, and certain ways that I at the time you didn't know how to show up for me. And I know for certain we have gotten closer and more understanding of each other throughout the years, whether that's a factor, whether my father's a factor or not. So I'm just incredibly proud of you.
Thank you, Hava. Yeah. We're going to
Laurie needs her last word.
To Laurie for the
last words.
word.
Okay, always for me. Back to business. Okay, so yeah, so we're both communication coaches, and we help people with presenting themselves in a way that'll maximize their connection with their listeners and also get the results that they want in their career and life.
And if you want to reach out to them, here's how you do it. That's Hava's info. That's right.
Yep.
Reach out on LinkedIn. And I love it. And
I can't do it.
Yeah, Hava's got to do. She's close.
Yep.
Love it. And what an incredible, beautiful conversation. You all know to follow us, subscribe, all of that. Watch us live on YouTube. Watch us live on Roku. And actually, we're coming up on LG and Samsung soon. So that's going to happen as well. Check us out on our Facebook page or my LinkedIn. And just so thankful that you joined in today, and you want to leave us with the last word, sir.
Yes, both of you just keep doing what you're doing. I can just feel nothing but genuine service from you, wanting to simply put out everything that you've learned. And I think that that's just sadly, not celebrated enough for really what can grow out of doing such a thing, right? And in the toughest of times. So thank you so much. I mean, I wish we could talk for hours. We literally just have to make sure the next show can get on. So that's why we had more questions and everything, right? But next episode, we'll definitely get that set up for us. But everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. As I say all the time, a like, a share, follow, anything. Truly, all of that adds up for us. And we mean what we say when we say it means the world to us. Yes. So conflict is here to teach you something about yourselves. Go out there, find out what that is. My name is Justin.
And I'm Dr. Lynne.
This was Working It Out, Cross Generations. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.